U.S. President Donald Trump's latest wave of reciprocal tariffs on exports from several dozen trading partners has countries and companies alike scrambling for better deals. Now, some economists are warning of a possible recession in the United States as a result of slowing down in the world's largest economy. U.S. tariffs are set to go into effect just after midnight on Thursday, including a 30% rate on most exports from South Africa. Now, it's one of the highest rates in sub-Saharan Africa.
South Africa is not alone in seeking to finalize a new trade framework with the US, Canada facing a 35% tariff rate, Switzerland a whopping 39%, Brazil a punitive 50% among a host of countries slapped with new duties. The impact's expected to be felt in those source countries, but also in the United States, where consumers are likely to bear the brunt. Moody's Analytics chief economist Mark Zandi on social media this week, warning that the US economy was on the precipice of a recession, a view echoed by others.
It's a completely ridiculous economic policy. I think the US economy is slowing down anyway, because a lot of households are heavily indebted, and the business investment. I know that Trump announces all these deals, but in fact, business investment has not been good in the first half of the year because many firms they don't know what's going to happen next. So they delay. So I think we're headed for a slower period of economic growth and maybe even some drop, a little bit of recession. Not a big recession, but a small recession.
Take Mexico, with whom a broader trade deal remains outstanding. The Trump administration in July announced a 17% duty on fresh tomatoes imported from that country, leaving importers like Jacobs Tomato Corp., a Brooklyn, New York wholesaler that gets about 90% of their tomatoes from Mexico, unclear about the future.
The United States can't handle the demand they don't grow enough to supply the United States of America. It's not realistic because not a lot of people are growing a wide variety of tomatoes in the United States, and the labor here is too much money, and they're not going to do the work here. In Mexico, they're going to do the work. They're going to get it done, and I don't think in the United States they're going to get it done. The only way to fix this is if they start giving growers land and they start growing more tomatoes in the United States. But right now, that's not happening. So basically, either they got to fix that problem first before tariffing Mexico, or either we got to keep it the old way, the same way it was before.
While unpredictability has framed the tariff debate, it is also being used as a political tool, as evidenced by the 50% levy on Brazil and India, over the coup trial of Trump ally and former President Jair Bolsonaro, and India's purchasing of Russian oil. All this while US inflation is picking up, consumer prices rising, and the labor market starting to show signs of cooling.
If you carry through an America First trade policy that actually doesn't pick winners and losers from U.S. manufacturers, that doesn't unnecessarily raise grocery prices, you get the benefit of the leverage of the trade negotiating table, the enhanced export market access for U.S. producers that are selling abroad. You've seen this carried through in some of the recent administration announcements where they are showing that having sort of a tough trade negotiating stance is driving wins. And so if you can get that without some of the immediate harm and so like consumers feeling the pain at the grocery store, that is a win-win.
South Africa's DTI has launched an export support desk to assist affected companies and advise on alternative markets, even as officials affirm that all channels of communication remain open in terms of finalizing a new bilateral trade arrangement with the United States.
We continue to engage with the U.S. government, and it is our intention that these negotiations are continued until a point at which we're able to reach a conclusion. And that, I think, is an important statement to make, because I think that the idea that we can get to a point where we just decide that we're not going to talk to any government and we're not going to engage in trade negotiations, I think would be irresponsible for us as a country.
A three-judge panel of the U.S. Court of International Trade initially ruled in May that President Trump had no authority to impose the reciprocal tariffs, but that block was lifted by an appeals court while it considered the broader dispute. The case brought by 12 Democratic-led states and 5 small business owners argued that the president overstepped his authority by imposing across-the-board tariffs on countries. The Court of International Trade ruled that the U.S. Constitution gave Congress the exclusive authority to regulate commerce with other countries, and that this was not overridden by the president's emergency powers to protect the U.S. economy. That matter is now before the 11 judges of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, and their future decision is likely to be appealed to the Supreme Court, that will have the final say on whether the tariffs imposed can stay in place, adding additional uncertainty into an already complicated mix. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.